Okay, so Ariel, it looks like we are live. Let me just get set up here and double check on my phone to make sure we're live. Let me just get Okay, and there are our little faces on my phone, so it looks like everything is ready to roll.
Hi, little faces on the phone.
Hi, little faces on the phone. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Okay, and I will just jump in to our introduction. So, welcome everyone to our Kepler College Astrology Book Club author Q&A. My name is Misty Lane, and I'm your book club admin. I'm here today with Arielle Guttman, author of our March Book of the Month, Venus Star Rising, A New Cosmology for the 21st Century. Arielle began her astrological studies in 1974 and has since authored 5 books in the field, including the 2-volume Mythic Astrology with Kenneth Johnson and the Astrocartography Book of Maps with the late Jim Lewis. More recently, she has authored the groundbreaking volume on Venus, which we read, Venus Star Rising, which covers the 5 Venus star points. Arielle has lectured and taught around the world for various astrological organizations and schools. She recently divides her time between Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Greece. She offers a home study course that leads to professional certification in the Venus Star Point system. And you can learn more about that on her website, sophiavenus.com. So, a few of our group members have pre-submitted some questions for you, Ariel. For everyone watching, I will be keeping an eye out on the chat. So, if you have any questions along the way, please pop them into the chat box and I will get them answered. And it looks like we have a few people joining us already. So, good morning, Priscilla, and good morning, Renkaya. I don't know how to pronounce that, but welcome. We're so happy to have you here. And wonderful. And thank you for the people who are joining us in the morning. I know 7 a.m. on the Pacific Coast is really early. So if you're joining us from Pacific time, thank you so much for starting your morning with us, having your morning coffee with us as well. We really appreciate that you're starting out your day with us. So Ariel, for those who do not know, we're on YouTube, so maybe some people watching did not read the book along with us, but can you summarize what is a Venus star and what drew you to working with it and writing a book on the topic?
Yeah. Well, that is the gist of the whole thing is what is the Venus star? And when I found out myself what it was, then I realized I have to write a book about it because it was so amazing, the material that I uncovered. It actually started in 2004 with a journey to France that I was co-leading. It was this Sacred Sites of the Feminine in France, and I was going to do a few astrology presentations on the tour, and I noticed that Venus was going to be retrograde during that cycle. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to talk about Venus because what's more in the sky, what's more considered sacred feminine than Venus, really? In
Mhm.
fact, all the temples and goddesses all around the world that people tune into and sometimes channel and sometimes just embody or really feel connected to, all those myths come from mostly Venus in the sky. Some of them are moon myths, and of course, there's a few other Greek and other culture goddesses that who we see in our chart as asteroids as well. But mainly, throughout the ages, Venus has been the one. the bright and shining one in the sky, whether you're looking at her in the morning or the evening. So it started with a little bit of exploring what Venus retrograde was all about. And it led me to when was the last one? And when was the last one before that? And the last one before that? And when I started putting them all together, of course, we always, as astrologers, usually anyway, start with our own lives. And,
Mhm.
you know, each time I saw Venus retrograde, where it fell in my chart, what house it was in, I thought, well, that's pretty amazing. Wow. Um, and I had these 8 year intervals of things that had happened in my life. Before I started working with Venus, I had things that would repeat in 8 year increments for about 20 years, and then they would kind of phase out. And I thought, what is this 8 year thing that I keep, and it was always usually with Venus retrograde. So I thought there's something here. But when I connected all the dots, I saw the five-pointed star of Venus, because really every 8 years, Venus completes two full stars, not just one. But if we're talking about retrogrades, um, it completes a whole retrograde set of Cazimis, and it also produces a whole direct set of Cazimis in that 8 year period. So it alternates, but there's two of them, and every 1.6 years, Venus goes retrograde. But every 8 years, Venus goes retrograde in the same sign. So that was the connecting link with my 8 year question of, wow, this happened to me 8 years ago. I particularly noted the Scorpio one because I have that in a particular place in my chart where it deals with health and other issues, and I was at certain issues of health, and I was having those kind of things repeat right during that Venus retrograde. And so
Mhm.
I thought, oh, okay, wow, that really explains it in a way other things, had not. Um, but there I found the pentagram, the five-pointed star, and I thought, well, this is amazing. Almost every one of these retrogrades is working in some particular way in my chart. So it led me to really drawing out more stars and seeing where Venus was at any given time, both in history, in my family history, in historical events, but also other um, celebrities or politicians or whatever. Look at how does it work in their chart, and just the feedback was immense, and it's what created this, you know almost, is it almost
Mhm.
400 pages or a little
Yeah,
over 400 page
it's a
book,
big
400
book.
page book.
It's a pretty huge book. There's a lot of wonderful information in there, absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
amazing that you did so much research, it seems, and so much of those discoveries are in there. Um, One question that I have is that a lot of us are more familiar with just that typical natal placement of our Venus sign, right? And so this brings in a new perspective, the Venus star point in our chart. So I guess what is the key difference between these points? So that Venus star point happens when the sun meets with when Venus meets with the sun, and then there's our planetary placement of Venus in the chart. So what are the key differences? And then do you have any thoughts as to how the two might interact or relate with each other?
Oh yes, for sure. um you don't want to ignore your natal Venus. That's still
Mhm.
important.
Yes.
But natal Venus is really, it's sort of going around the ecliptic, it's going around the sun. And your natal Venus is just a picture of where it was on the day, the exact spot it was on the day you were born, in relationship to nothing else in particular. Um, the Venus star point is the pre-birth cazimi of Venus, the sun, and all lined up with the Earth. So the Earth, Venus, and Sun are all in alignment. Okay, that's what makes the
Mhm.
cazimi very powerful. Any cazimi, any planet cazimi with the sun is basically in the heart of the sun, it's a conjunction. We call it a conjunction, but it's a very, very tight conjunction, less than a degree. And it happens for Venus, it happens every 9 something months, a little over 9 months, which of course is the, fertility, gestation cycle, human conception to birth. So it has a lot to do with that too. But you don't even have to take that literally. You can say
Mhm.
one cazimi, like now we just had one in Aries, early Aries. It's the seed planting time, it's the insemination moment. And then 9 months from now, we will give birth to, in early Capricorn, when mid degrees of Capricorn in January, when it comes into the next cazimi. So every 9 months, we're looking to the next 9 months ahead. Okay, when am I beginning now in Aries to the next one? But the power of the lineup, the prenatal alignment of the sun, earth, and Venus is, I always say it's like a laser beam of light from the sun, a shot of love, heart energy from Venus, um, penetrating to the earth body, which is also our body. So it's
Mhm.
coming to earth because it's infusing its energy all around the earth. But if we're in a prenatal condition there, if we're in the womb and we are still, our cells are still forming and growing and becoming who we are, it's almost like a shot to our own heart that says, this is something we're going to carry with us. And the way, throughout our whole life. And the way that I look at the difference is that natal Venus is where we look for love and security and maybe pleasure and all those things Venusian, beauty, art, all these things outside, in our outside world, in our environment. And the Venus star point has more to do with where all those things exist inside of us. So because it's with the sun, it's a more, and the earth, it's that, lineup of all three. It's a more intense connection and within us. And so I kind of wanted to say, is it like the soul of Venus? Is it like the higher aspect of Venus? Yes, you could say that. um, this was so new to me. I was searching all the Venus literature I could find when this material came through to me to say, write the book, put this out there. And I didn't find much written about the pentagram. There were a few things in astrology, but not a lot.
Mhm.
There were um, a lot of things outside of astrology written about the Venus pentagram that I found, um, but which is all in the book. I mean, the mythology, if you
Yes.
read the mythology section and the
There's
geometry,
so
the
many
sacred
rich stories
geometry,
in there.
well, there's a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
As you can see, people have been looking at Venus for a long time. All the different cultures have been looking around the world from ancient times forward. They've all been looking at Venus and wondering about it and forming stories about it and also recording its precise movements, oh,
Hmm.
okay. It was rising exactly in this position, let's say right over my back fence, next to that tree, 8 years ago. It was rising. Okay. And then now it's rising again in the same spot. It's like, where did it go? In that 8 years, but it came back.
It came back to the fence.
Yeah.
That is a funny way to look at it. I think I might try that myself. Is it touching that one tree? That seems like a fun project to consider.
Well,
But
it
yeah,
is. If you want to do sky watching and experiential Venus, it's always good to win Venus. And that's the point. That's a heliacal rise that's really
mhm,
important. And that is when it rises with the sun. We just had the Cazimi last weekend, oh, just a few days ago, on the
mhm,
22nd, 23rd of March. I think becomes visible in some areas, like on the 29th or the 30th. But see, it's not visible at the same time in every place on the world. There's interferences, sometimes there's clouds or mountains or
Mm-hmm.
buildings or whatever. So from your location, you may not see it exactly that day. But if you've got a really clear horizon and you're out there in the morning sky about an hour or so before sunrise, you probably will see it in the next few days coming up. And I think this one had a peculiar um, um, anomaly to it. Normally, you can't see evening star Venus and morning star Venus together, but on one day, a few days ago, around the Cazimi, you could see it. You could see it setting at night, and then you could see it rising again in the morning. It was very close.
Wow.
Maybe yeah, but it's unusual for that to happen. But when she disappears from the sun, which I've explained in the book, it's kind of like an alchemical process because she's disappearing. You don't see her. She's not in the evening sky anymore. I can't watch her. But suddenly there's something in the morning sky, and it's the same planet. It's Venus. So she comes back out from an alchemical process, changed.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that change? What was that change all about? So when Venus is in darkness and we can't see her, there's also things going on for us inside that are just kind of incubating, kind of marinating, and until it becomes a little bit clearer, a little bit more visible, we don't always know what that's going to be, what we're going to be giving birth to. But it's usually something pretty powerful.
I would say I did have an aha moment within the last week, and I did attribute that to the Venus Cazimi, and it was very nice to just be lost and confused in one area for that to happen. And now it's like, now I think it can be moving somewhere. So those Kazimis are I think they're very powerful, and I like to phrase them as like aha moments. The planet's getting hugged by the sun, revitalized. So it's a beautiful, beautiful moment.
It really
And we
is.
have a
Yeah.
few comments. Welcome, Tonya. She says she's really enjoying the presentation. Tonya has an evening star, Venus star point, and that's how I feel. That's wonderful, Tonya. So yeah, it's a really interesting time right now, and I think the Kazemi infuses us with a good amount of optimism. Okay, so let's see what other questions we have here. And in the chat, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat and we will see if we can get them answered. Um, okay, so we covered the difference between the Venus star point and the natal Venus. And then that brings me in our group chat, we had some confusion related to the Venus star point in our charts. So when it comes to our natal Venus star point, how does it interact with the rest of our natal chart? Does it work in the same way where it's aspecting planets? And how can that all synthesize within the chart as a whole?
Yes. Those are good questions.
Hmm.
I have It's interesting. I think that if you just look at it as a really important point, like a new planet discovery, I
Hmm.
use the darkened Venus. I use the glyph like a dark Venus because you can't see it when it's Cazimi, so it's blackened out, a Venus, and then just a little star next to it. Or you can just put a little star there. Let's say it's 14 Gemini, which was the last evening star we had. Let's say you're Venus Cazimi and you had a new baby and it's 14 Gemini Cazimi. And Jupiter's been traveling with it all year. So that baby's been born with Jupiter conjunct its Cazimi. So yeah, and then what house was it, is it in, and what else does it aspect in your chart? when I start analyzing the Venus star point for people, and it usually almost always 95% of the time it's the prenatal conjunction, not the next one, even though you might be born a little closer. But
Hmm.
there are exceptions to that rule, but that's a little more advanced material, although it is in the book also. I
Yeah.
use the example of Winston Churchill, who was born 9 days before the next Cazimi, and we pushed him up because from Pisces, which he would have been technically, to Sagittarius, because both Venus and Sun were already in Sagittarius, and which means that energy was already there. They'd already, and if you're into co-presence in a sign or whole sign houses or anything like that, you know that when two planets are together in a sign, there's a conversation already going on. There's already kind of a blending happening, and so they were getting close. So, but that doesn't always happen. You may be
Mhm.
born 9 or 10 days before the next Cazimi, and your sun is still in Scorpio, and Venus is in Sagittarius. So it's not quite there yet, but so there are ways that I talk about that. But also, when the Kazemi is happening, I think there's a table in the book. Let's see what page that's on. I have the book with me. I bookmarked a few places. Um, on page 241 and 242, um, it's really under the relationships section, like how does the Venus
Hmm.
star define relationships? Like, let's say your Venus star is conjunct someone else's sun or ascendant, which I
Right.
find in important relationships very frequent, that your Venus star I've had people say this to me over the years. My Venus star is in Aries, and I have nothing in Aries, but I'm married in Aries, and my daughter's in Aries. You know, so there's a star point, there's a heart connection there for sure. Um, so this is about like your star point to somebody else's, but you can apply this to your own chart as well. Your Venus star point to Mercury, let's say they are conjunct at your birth. It's a desire for communication, for education and travel, for playfulness, and for all of those things that Mercury represents, whatever sign it's in. And if it's in Virgo, I found a few people I know that have the Virgo Mercury, which is, of course, exalted in Virgo. It's in
Hmm.
domicile, its own sign, with a Venus star point in Virgo. And they've been editors, or they've been somebody that actually, like editors of technical papers and or astrology things or scientific journals or whatever. Um, so there's definitely, okay, Mercury in Virgo says you'd be good at that, but the Venus star point says you'd not only be good at that, but you probably love doing it. It really makes you happy. And I think that the Venus star point, more than natal Venus, is where we get inner joy. All the planets produce some kind of energy for us. And I
Hmm.
really feel like when I break it down, it's like, what do I just love about my life? What do I just love about life in general? And I think the Venus star point can answer those questions.
Okay, that puts it into perspective a lot better. I definitely paid attention to that page, especially, and I was kind of already taking that and just applying that to my own natal chart because I was born shortly after the Venus Cazimi, and a lot of my planets are interacting with it. So I've been paying some attention to that. And that is a wonderful, yeah, wonderful perspective. We have a few questions in the chat. Tonya wants to know if you feel that there's any connection between Venus and Lilith.
Venus, natal Venus or the Venus star point?
Um, that is a good question. Tonya, would you mind clarifying that, or is it just Venus in general? And we'll move on to the next question while you're typing that in the
Oh,
chat.
I can say one thing about
Okay.
that. From my understanding, Lilith, and there are three positions of Lilith in the chart that you can derive, but I think one of them is an asteroid and two of them are from the moon, and they're like the black moon. So it's like behind the moon. So it's really Lilith has, I would say, more of a connection to the moon. The Venus Cazimi is totally about Venus and the sun.
Okay.
Okay. So there is a difference. I don't think of them as being connected, but you might have your own Venus star point connected to your Lilith, in which case
Hmm.
you've got, the Cazimi Venus behind the sun, invisible behind the sun, and Lilith invisible behind the moon, interacting with each other. So there's a lot going on, that's unseen,
Hmm.
and they're having a conversation.
Okay, perfect. Tonya said either, and then Venus star point. So I believe that answered that. And yeah, it really just depends on your own chart, it seems, and how you're connecting with it as well. But they are both um, placements, archetypes that do recommend do associate with that more feminine energy. So I can definitely see how there could be that connection between the two, especially. And then Mayflower would like to know, how does this relate to the Venus transit of 106 or 120-year cycles? Any connection
Okay.
historically that you know of?
Yeah. Again, in the book, if you got to that point, um, it's early in the book, actually. Page 52, page 53, page 54. I'm laying out the historical context for Venus and the sightings and all of that. But yeah, the Venus transits are really important. I've done actually quite a few presentations on that. This Venus transits over the face of the sun, which is basically like an eclipse. It's like
I saw
Venus
that. That's really
eclipsing the
cool.
sun. And it's the only time you can actually see Venus when it's Cazimi the sun, because it's like a dark spot moving across the sun. And it happens about every 120 years, but it happens in pairs in an 8-year separation period. It's that 8-year return. So it happened in 1631 and then 1639. This is the first um, evidence in recorded history of the sightings. Now, I'm not saying other cultures and people did not cite the Venus transits before then, but all we really have written records of is starting in 1631 and 1639. And then the next one, you have to jump to 1761 and 1769. And then the next one is 1874 to 1882. So most all of us born in the 20th century were very highly influenced by the pair that transited in 1874 and 1882. And I have also done a few workshops on this where um, amazing people were born during that 8-year transit period that influenced the 20th century tremendously. And the next one, you have to jump to 2004 to 2012. So that is the one for our lifetime. Usually you're only going to have one of those transits in your lifetime. And sometimes you might not have any because you're born in between the transits. You come into life and pass out of life before.
Mhm.
But they were said when I did the historical research about it, it was said that some really big revolutionary um, activities happened for Venus during that time, changing life as we know it, and not necessarily war. revolution, but revolutionary ideas and concepts that change our everyday world, that change society. And so I was, like first getting the material for this book in 2004 at the first Venus transit. That's when it started coming to me. And it was completed, the book was completed in 2011, right before the second Venus transit. And um, so when we were first in it, I wasn't seeing, okay, what's the revolution that's happening now? What's it going to be? But looking back at it, wow, that transit was in Gemini. They always happen in Gemini or Sagittarius because they alternate between Venus's nodes, which are, you
Hmm.
know, Gemini and Sagittarius. And Venus's heliocentric nodes are conjunct Uranus's heliocentric nodes. So no wonder people said it usually as like revolutionary things that change the culture and whatnot.
Hmm.
Well, when we look back between 2004 and 2012 for that Gemini transit, what did we get? We got the
Social
smartphone.
media was getting really big.
Everything. We got texting,
Hmm.
we got the smartphone, we got all the social media sites we're still using today that were really, really big. Facebook came out then, YouTube came out then. Um, so many others came. I have a whole list of them somewhere else, but are you kidding? It definitely revolutionized the way we learn, the way we communicate, the way um, business is done, the way everything happens, using these phones and using um, you know, the information that's contained there. It's like all the world's information that's ever been recorded is right there in the palm of your hand. Um, so, whereas in the Sagittarius transit set, the 120 years before, what was being built and invested in were things like universities of higher learning, libraries, book printing, publishing houses were really coming, being born. The big publishing houses were coming out around that time. And what did we see during the Gemini transit? We almost saw a lot of publishing houses go under. We saw Amazon taking over where so many small bookstores, independent bookstores, just closed. We saw libraries being closed or limiting their hours severely. And now, as we carry it through, even a decade later, suddenly it became common again to start banning certain books, which hadn't been done in since like the Victorian age.
Hmm.
Maybe since then there had been, but now there's a list of there's books that you can't even are going to be hard to obtain anymore. But so these Gemini transits are really important in terms of um, how it is controlling information, you know, and how the media has gone into, our phones and how it's been influencing social media and creating a mindset for people in terms of how they think based on, what they believe in based on, what they're seeing on their phone.
Absolutely.
So it's huge and it's still happening and it's going to continue to happen. Um, but yeah, thanks for that question. That's one of actually my favorite aspects of Venus is that those Venus transits. The next set won't happen until 2117 and 2125. So we have a long way to go.
It's a long way to
Um,
go.
2125, that's 100 years from now. So, you know, in 2117, some of you will be alive, but you're probably not listening to this recording
Hey, you
yet.
never know. Maybe they'll save it. But hopefully we do make it that long. I'm hoping science advances and maybe I can live to being 130 years old. That would be pretty awesome. We have a
And in
question.
lieu of that, tell your grandchildren about it.
Oh yeah, there will be a lot of stories to tell. Absolutely. And we have a question from Petite Gal 25. She says, so are you saying to look at our Venus star point, which will be the sign before our natal Venus, and also check what planets the star point aspects in our chart, and it points to what brings us joy. Yeah, that's the gist of it, it seems, Petite Gal 25. Um, Ariel in the book has a list where you can look up the Venus star point that happened to the closest time you were born, and then you'd look at the star point that happened before your birthday. That's going to be your Venus star point. And then you will apply that to the rest of your chart.
That table is on page 80 and 81. And for instance, throw out a date to me, and I'll just tell you what it is based on here. Throw out a birth date, somebody.
Does anyone want to share their birthday? Or I'll throw out mine.
Okay.
Okay, August 25th, 1995.
Okay. August 25th, 1995. So if you go to the table on page 81, you'll see that in August of 1995, August 20th, we had a Leo evening star. And
Mm-hmm.
you said you were born just a few days after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So you're a Leo evening star,
Yes.
which was the one just prior to that. So that's how you do it. You just look. Now, remember, there's only 5 points of the star or 5 signs on the star of Venus at any given time. And they do change, they change over time. So you have to look at a table of Cazimis. If you don't have the book, you can go to my website and you can get the free PDF of the list of table of dates and download it from there, which a lot of people have done. And I always like to acknowledge the St. Louis Astrological Association for providing that table for me, the webmaster of that group, after I spoke there many years ago when the book first came out, had created that table, and it's very
Mm-hmm.
nice. So if you go to sophiavenus.com and then you go to discover the Venus star point, find your Venus
Mm-hmm.
star point, the table is right there. Um, a lot of people download it to their phone and carry it with them so that whenever you meet somebody or want to know, oh, what happened in, gosh, that was 6 years ago. Where was the start point then? You can
Mm-hmm.
look it up you can have it right there at your fingertips. Like I said, every information in the world is here, right?
In our hand. And I have dropped that link to Ariel's website in the chat, and it's literally just right there. On the home page, you'll see a link under Go Deeper into the Venus Star Point. There's a link that says Find Your Venus Star Point here, and that takes you directly to that PDF. So again, just look up your birthday and identify the star point that happened preceding your birthday.
Yeah, so don't expect to find your Venus star point ever in Pisces or in Libra, or even in Taurus or Sagittarius, because Taurus and Sagittarius are already pretty much done with
Okay.
their life or at the very, very end of their life. And Libra and Pisces have yet to begin. We've only had one Libra star point born in 2022, so you may have a child or that or a grandchild born then with the Libra star point. But so a lot of people will say to me, well, my Venus star point's in Pisces. And no, 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 it can't be, you know. So that's why. And, it's going to keep coming back you'll see. And this is the thing about Venus, it has that rhythm of five. It is a
Mm-hmm.
circle divided by five, which is the fifth harmonic. Um, And I know in vibrational astrology, the fifth harmonic, also in Vedic astrology, is very important. Um, it has to do with creativity and special talent, which of course Venus would also connect to, right? Especially Venus and the Sun when they're cazimi. So that is kind of a nice thing to know about it. But the beauty of getting your brain to flow with the cycle of the Venus star is to just keep looking down the list of dates and you'll see, you know, Capricorn, Scorpio, Leo, Gemini, Aries, Capricorn, Scorpio, Leo, Gemini, Aries. So, in other words, you'll get the rhythm of, okay, it's going to just keep coming back. It's going to keep going around the circle until it gets to zero of the sign, and then it's going to pass out of the sign and go to the next sign.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's really all about identifying that pattern, identifying that rhythm. So don't just look, I would say, don't just look at your Venus star point in the book, but look at to the other signs that are a part of that rhythm for you. And Ariel does cover that rhythmic flow of transits from one star point to another, depending on where your natal star point is. Um, it's a lot of reflecting work. There's a lot to just go into your mind about and remember things. And we had an interesting conversation about that, just about astrology in general. But at my age, I'm 30, almost 30, and so going back, in my mind, I can only go back 8 years. I don't really remember too much before that. But do you have any recommendations as to doing that inner type of reflection work and going into that memory? Do you have any sort of like thing that you do when it comes to tracking such things, or is it just going back on those journal entries, going back on the planners and working with that from there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've always been a journal keeper, and unfortunately, my journals from childhood all got tossed out. Um, I think at a certain point, my parents were storing them in the basement of the house for a very long time, and then finally, when they moved um, and they had to really get rid of a lot of things, the boxes of journals from my childhood and teenage years went with them, which to me is one of the most priceless possessions of my life. It was like,
Hmm.
oh God, you just threw away $1 million object, you know. But they didn't know that. I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying that if you do keep a journal, it is a treasure trove. And it may not seem important now, but in years to come, it will be. So if you haven't started doing that, go ahead and do it. I also started keeping it because I was always a dreamer and I was keeping dream journals before I even read that it's good to keep a dream journal.
Hmm.
Um, but my adult journals are still in existence, you know, since about the age of 30-ish, you know, I still have them and I draw from them a lot. And yeah, that's one way to look back. If you can't remember it consciously, um, you can maybe do something like hypnosis or some kind of other suggestion of a meditation, an inner guidance meditation to try to go back and think, okay, I was 17 years old. What happened then? You know,
Hmm.
and just start imagining, well, at 17, I was in high school and I went to this high school and who were my friends and what were we doing then? And what was happening in my home and with my family. And so there are ways to kind of, you know, jog the memory. Uh, but if it's before the age of about 10, I'd say, or even 7, it may not be, you may not have as much memory recall from them.
Right.
And I think it's really interesting because, you know, dementia starts to happen as we age and get really older. And also, we can't remember what happened when we were really young. So there's like a few years in the beginning of life and a few years at the very end of life where our minds are just, where I think maybe it's just a design. It's like a human design of saying, okay, you don't need that left brain anymore. You don't need to be
Mhm.
thinking about all these things. Just kind of let it go and experience things.
I do think you're right about that. I think it is probably about design. Even just like right now in my digital spaces, I'm getting all of these cloud notifications like your memory storage is too full. You need to delete things or we're going to charge you more. I do think that that is probably what's going on in our brains. It's like, okay, we need to dump some stuff out so we can make room for more stuff.
I have the same problem, Misty. I'm always getting you're running out of memory, running out of storage. And for me, when I have people help me with my computer, because I'm a little dense about certain things of how it all works, they say, "What are you keeping all this stuff for?"
Yeah, I made a post about that because it got to a point where I was losing track of things and I posted our old study group, our last study group video very late. And I'm like, I am coming to terms right now during this retrograde period that I'm a digital hoarder. So it is my especially like my Mercury retrograde project is to usually go in and clear those things out and get a little organized. So if you're looking for a way to work with like the Mercury retrograde, I highly recommend cleaning out your digital space.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
not before you've saved the important things. Mercury retrograde is the classic time when, oh God, everything just disappeared.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Keep track of
I
what's
know.
important, especially, which is hard to
I
do
mean,
in the digital
Google's
space.
always telling me I'm running out of space. Google's always telling me that. And Apple has told me that too. And I bought extra storage. I keep buying extra storage. But with Google, I mean, I just started a whole new program, email program, so I could just quit getting those messages from Google all the time about your storage, your storage.
Yeah, sometimes you just need to start a new one. That's okay. Sometimes you just have to have a space where you're hoarding a lot of stuff. That's normal.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm having that same problem in my physical life too. I'm living in Greece now pretty much full time. And so I still have all this storage in Santa Fe. And I they keep also raising the rates. You got to buy more storage. I don't have any more room in that storage for anything else. So it's finally time. I've decided, okay, I'm getting this message everywhere. It's time to really start letting go of things. And I do want to put this out here since Kepler is a book club,
mhm,
since this is a book club, and I am on the faculty at Kepler, and I'm very fond of being connected with the group. You know, it's been really good. It's been fun. Is I do have a lot of astrology books in there that are sometimes many of them are out of print, many are signed by the author, many I can't take them to Greece, I can't store them. So I am looking for a place to ship a bunch of books to if people want them. So I'm just putting this out there in
mhm.
case, you have any ideas for me.
I bet we can work on helping you distribute those. If you want, you can. I'll follow up with you via email and maybe loop in some other people for that. You're also welcome to make a post. I think you're in the Facebook group. If you want to make a post and see if you can
Yeah.
organize that with someone, we can do like a giveaway or like maybe a little sale type of situation. But yeah, or we can just add them. I know we're associated with some astrology libraries, and maybe some of those books need to be digitized as well. So that would be definitely worth looking into, I think.
Yeah, so we could talk about that later, but also I do have a couple of boxes of the Venus Star book, the first printing of it, that are still there that I also could ship somewhere. But I'm not going to have time to ship one book here and one book there and one book here and go to the
Right.
post office and do all this. So it's going to have to be like one or two boxes to one central address. And then if somebody wants to be the recipient of that and volunteer to then distribute them, however, that would be great for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. We'll see if we can work something out. I think that would be a really wonderful thing to do. So thank you for bringing that up. And we have a lot of good feedback about that from the Black Psychic librarian, Tonya. I'm a former
Oh,
librarian, she says, so she just loves this idea. Thank you, Tonya.
okay.
Um, okay, do we have any last questions? I'll give everyone in the chat one last question before we wrap up. We have about 5 minutes left. So if you have anything you think you want answered pretty quickly, go ahead and type it in. And I have a question. We were talking about Mercury retrograde. So I remember in the book you went through like some of the mandala shapes that all of the planets form. So is there some sort of star point situation with Mercury as well? Maybe not exactly a star, but other shapes going on with other planetary
Yeah.
transits? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, if you all want to watch there's if you tune into the Kepler College YouTube channel, um, Column did an interview with me on the Venus, Venus and her phases. And I show some of the planetary mandalas there, but Venus is the only one that makes the five-pointed star, the pentagram, which has a unique vibration and a unique way in which it manifests. It's tied actually to the golden mean or golden section of 1.6, which is also the Fibonacci sequence, which is really about art and beauty and how nature grows. And of course, it would be Venus. But
Hmm.
Mercury has a six-pointed star that it makes. It kind of goes in a triangle. It'll be an Earth, and then the three retrogrades in a year will be in Earth, or then they'll be in fire, and then they'll be in air, and then they'll go around. But there's this as above, so below thing with Mercury. That's where that came from, the as above,
Hmm.
so below idea was, Mercury reaching, the highest point in the sky, and then, getting the closest point to Earth, um, at the same point, and then the two extreme points of the rising and the setting make a triangle to the one below, and then they make a triangle to the one above, and they happen at different times, but it's like a six-pointed star. And I thought that that was pretty interesting because it Mercury's more about the mind and the intellect, and
Hmm.
Venus is more about the heart. So the five-pointed star is really, about the love and the heart connection, and the Mercury, which is Venus, and then Mercury's more about the mind.
I love that. I'll have to look more into that because that, especially with Mercury, that does sound like something that's definitely worth looking into with that as above, so below, bringing what's
Yeah,
up
I mean that
there
could be
down
a good book.
here.
That could be a good book for one of your future book clubs. Gary Caton wrote a book on Mercury, called An Astrological Triptych. And that book talks about Mercury's six-pointed star and Mercury's, cycles and whatnot. So you might want to choose that book for a future um, I don't know, you might be stacked up with books and waiting, but that's a good one. If people are interested in what Mercury does and how it does it, definitely I
Hmm.
would check that out.
I think we might have to add that to to the list because I think people would be really interested in that.
Yeah.
And we have one last question. I think I'll go ahead and answer this one. Priscilla asked, will there be additional opportunities to post questions? So much to absorb. Priscilla, you can post any question that you have in the Facebook group. Just feel free to get to that Facebook group page, enter your thoughts in the little field, click submit, and we'll see if we can answer them. If Arielle wants to hop on and answer that in the Facebook group, she can. If she can't get around to it, then I can tag. I know sometimes our posts in there can get a little bit lost, but I can, if it's really urgent or really interesting, I can be sure to tag everyone so that we can get that question answered for you and hopefully figure that out. And then we're also going to be doing our study group tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific. And that can be a way for us to hash out any further confusion. We will be meeting face to face. And that meeting link is available in our Facebook group, which is a private group. So if you're interested in joining that study group session with us tonight, just join that Facebook group, and then you will find the link in the featured section in that first post in the featured section. So you can join us for that tonight. Okay,
Great.
you're
I
welcome,
love that.
Priscilla.
So, Misty, if you want to send me, if there's like an urgent question or a question that you feel like maybe Ariel should answer this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm so behind on social media. I'm not good with it. I don't keep up with it that frequently,
Right,
but I will be glad to answer it. So send me a little, send me a reminder or a text or just a note somewhere, on Facebook or, on Messenger. I don't always check Facebook. I must say, I don't always check Facebook, but when I
right.
do, I like really get into it and try to keep up with what's been posted since I was on there last. But you can easily miss things. So
Yes, you can.
yeah,
Absolutely. Well, perfect. Let us wrap it up then. And
thank you
Ariel,
so
thank you.
much. This has been great. Yeah,
Thank you. This has been great. And
yeah.
thank you to everyone who is watching. The chat was really popping off. So I loved seeing that and loved getting to chat with you all. So thank you to Ariel and everyone who joined us today and who read along with us for throughout the month. Our April book of the month is The Nature of Astrology by Bruce Schofield. We will post our regular discussion posts every Thursday in the Kepler College Astrology Book Club Facebook group. And I will drop that link in the chat if you're not a part of that yet. And along with that main group feed, we do host a private group chat for each book of the month so that we can have more candid discussion and get those questions answered a little bit faster. Even if it's kind of like we're all confused, how can we put our brain together to figure this out? It's a good way to figure things out. So let me pop that in the chat real fast. And okay. Again, thank you, Ariel, and thank you to everyone who
Thank
joined
you,
us
Misty.
today. And everyone have a wonderful rest of their week and have a wonderful
Yeah,
weekend.
yeah.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of the Venus retrograde.
Yes, enjoy. Get the most out of it. Okay. And